Good day, my little robins. It's me, Beth. Another week has passed, which means you get another video from, well, me. And if you haven't already read the title, I'm back ranking another band's albums worst to best. The band I am ranking today is Lacuna Coil. They have 8 studio albums, which, not gonna lie, was a lot of albums to listen to in a row. Before I had to, rank them worst to best. Disclaimer before we begin this video, this is just my ranking. This is just my own opinion. I feel like I have to say this now because in the comments in the past when I've done, ranking videos or when I've done my top 10 favourites, I've had some really mean comments saying, why don't you agree with my opinion? Everyone is entitled to their own opinion, so, this video is just my opinion. If you don't like my ranking, then, go watch another video. Pretty self-explanatory. Before we begin this ranking, if you want to support me and the channel, you can by clicking like to show me some love. You can also smash that subscribe button because I upload twice a week on a Monday and a Friday. But enough rambling, let's just dive right into this ranking Lacuna Coil albums worst to best. Coming in at number 8 is the album Shallow Life. Now for me, this was the biggest departure, from the typical Lacuna Coil sound, that, as a fan, I knew to date. For me, this album feels like, the band as a whole, were sick of sitting on, being on the outside of mainstream. So they threw this album together in order, to appeal to like a more mainstream rock audience, which they did. But by throwing this album together, for me, it feels really sloppy. And I would have loved it, if they spent, just a little bit more time, finessing the small details instead of wanting to be mainstream. If I had to pick my favourite song on the album, it is Spellbound. It's a beautiful song. I love the music video. If I had to pick my least favourite song, it is I Like It, which I think is kind of ironic because I don't like this album. Coming in at number 7 is Reverie, which is, I'm not gonna lie, one debut album I can just not get into. I can't stand it. I think it's kind of bland. There are a few nice melodies, on it, don't get me wrong, but like I've already said, I found it kind of bland. Despite, the fact, that critics really like this debut album, I don't. If I had to pick my favourite song, it is My Wings, and my least favourite song is Circle. I've got, notes in front of me, so if you see me looking down, I'm looking at my notes. Coming in at number 6 is Unleashed Memories. Now, for me, Unleashed Memories feels a little bit too experimental for, like a sophomore album. Not that I have anything against, bands experimenting. I love when, some of my favourite bands do experiment. But for me, when you're releasing a sophomore album, as a band, I feel like you've got to take, the best elements, from your debut album, put them on the album, and then, kind of, like, raise yourselves up a bit. You don't want to be too experimental because sometimes it can backfire. Critics, again, love this album, but for me, I just can't get into it, although there are a couple of good songs on there, I will admit that. If I had to pick my favourite song, off Unleashed Memories, it is Distant Sun. The lyrics are beautiful. Lacuna Coil are amazing songwriters. My least favourite song is Purify. Every time it comes on shuffle, I go to the next song. Coming in at number 5 is Dark Adrenaline. Now for me, this just feels like an updated version of Shallow Life. Don't get me wrong, it's slightly heavier than Shallow Life and a lot heavier than, albums that came before it. And this showed, when it came to rankings on, rock charts around the world. This is a pretty solid Lacuna Coil album, but for me personally, Lacuna Coil have a lot better albums, in their discography. If I had to pick my favourite song, off this album, it is End of Time, which is one, of the more slow ballad type songs. I love me, a good slow song. And my least favourite song is The Army Inside. I just feel like it's a throwaway song that wasn't needed. Coming in at number 4 is Broken Crown Halo. Now I really like the theme and the overlapping story arc throughout this album. It's a pretty decent album, and for me this just shows that Lacuna Coil can still make a relevant rock album you know, that can compete, you know, with modern day rock bands, while still, you know, pushing the boundaries and, you know, experimenting with, you know, how they want to sound. I really like this album, despite the fact that I know quite a few people don't. If I had to pick my favourite song off this album, it is Cyber Sleep. There's just something about the lyrics, you know, it's a bit unhinged. I love me a good unhinged song. And my least favourite song on this album would have to be Infection. I just don't like it, enough said. Coming in at number 3 is Karmacode. Now for me, this is an assault on the ears. It is a beautiful album start to finish. The songs flow naturally and I can appreciate, you know, good songwriting. Each song, you know, fits in. Well, I think they had a bit of a theme going, but I'm not quite sure. Now you're probably thinking, you loved it, why didn't you give it a higher ranking? Because the last 2 albums, you know, that I'm going to rank, I like more than Karmacode, so that's why it got my number 3 spot. I love it. If I had to pick my favourite song off this album, it is The Game, and my least favourite song is Devoted. But it was very hard to pick a least favourite song on this album, because, you know, even some of the average songs, I'm like, I don't hate you enough to put you on my dislike list. Coming in at number 2 is Komal Eyes, and I am not just saying, you know, this album hit very high because, you know, of the Vampire Masquerade soundtrack. This is a solid album, start to finish, and it stands the test of time, and, you know, I think, for me, it shows, you know, modern rock bands, you know, what they should strive for when it comes to, like, a near perfect album. Each song on this, you know, feels relevant. You can listen to it, you know, today and be like, okay, yeah, I understand what they're saying. Or, you know, you could listen to it when the album first came out and think the exact same thing. For me, Komal Eyes is, you know, a near perfect album. It just missed out on, you know, the number 1 spot on this list. If I had to pick my favourite song off the album, it is Heaven's a Lie. Again, the reason, I love the lyrics. And my least favourite song is Humane. I had to double check. I said it right. I don't like it. It just feels like the one song that's out of place on an overall good album. Coming in at number 1, so, you know, the best Lacuna Coil album in my eyes is Delirium. Now, I came into this album, you know, listening as a storyteller, and I really loved, you know, the sanitarium theme, and, you know, the overall, you know, lapping, you know, decline in mental state. For me, this is a really solid concept album, and I love me a good concept album. I recently, you know, bought it on vinyl because I love it so much. You know, you can check out that video and you can see me, you know, praising Delirium. For me, when you listen to, you know, each song on the album, each song is like a descent into insanity. And when you come out the other end, you'll be left questioning, you know, your own mentality. And I think, you know, when a band, you know, does that, it is a pretty solid album. All the songs, you know, flow naturally and, you know, fit the overall story arc they were going for. And for me, this is the most recent, you know, Lacuna Coil album, and I cannot wait, you know, to see where they go, you know, with their 9th album, because they can only go up from here. If I had to pick my favourite song, you know, off Delirium, it is Blood, Tears, Dust. And, you know, mainly that's to do with the music video, which I highly recommend you checking out. And my least favourite song is Ghost in the Mist. I just can't get into it, and it kind of jars, you know, my listening experience. But for me, Delirium is one album I love listening to on repeat, and I always recommend it to my friends. That just ends my ranking of Lacuna Coil albums, best to worst. I hope you guys, you know, learned something about me, and, you know, how I feel, you know, about this band. I am really passionate about Lacuna Coil, if you can't tell, hence the excitement in my voice. In the comments below, I'd love, you know, to hear your guys' thoughts and opinions. How would you rank Lacuna Coil albums? I want to know, start a conversation. While down there you can check out all the links to my social media, because why the hell not, nothing's stopping you. You can also click like to show me some love, and you can smash my, you know, face right here to subscribe to the channel, because I upload twice a week on a Monday and a Friday. You can check out my last 2 videos or playlist right here, depending on what mood I'm in when I'm editing this. But until next week, I am Beth, Keep listening to good music. Goodbye.